What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, back with another fantasy stardom and situm for week number 6 of the NFL season. Let's get right into the video. If you've never tuned into the bottom line view before, if you've never clicked on one of these videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and support the channel. We do NFL recaps, live reactions, fantasy football tips and tricks videos, and topic videos. Everything on the NFL is here on the bottom line view, so make sure you subscribe. Let's get into it with the quarterback starts. Starting off with Jameis Winston, the return of Winston. Now, he may be or may not be eating W's in this matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. It should be a close game, and the reason why I'm saying this is because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Atlanta Falcons, both teams have one thing in common and one thing in common only. Their defenses are absolutely atrocious. So that being said, Jameis Winston, last year, week number 1, the first game Jameis Winston started last season. Hey, that's the same as this week. He threw 4 touchdowns last season against the Atlanta Falcons, and they did win that game. So that being said, they may or may not win this game. It doesn't matter for fantasy football purposes. But I think he's going to throw a lot of yards. You know that Jameis Winston isn't worried about throwing the ball right in that little hole, that little tiny little bit of space to get it to his wide receiver. And Jameis Winston, he just takes chances. So sometimes that's good for fantasy football. When he's on, he's on. And I think against the Atlanta Falcons, he will be on. We have yet to see a quarterback fail in fantasy against the Atlanta Falcons defense. Like I said last week for Ben Roethlisberger, they play a couple simple defenses. They don't really switch it up. It's in a dome. So Jameis Winston's just going to be balling and throwing it up to Mike Evans, throwing it to Deshaun Jackson. And by the way, I thought Jameis Winston in the preseason had his best preseason he's ever had in his NFL career. I think he's going to come out with a purpose. I think he's going to come out motivated. So if you need a quarterback to pick up, probably Jameis Winston sitting there. I would pick him up and start him this week against Atlanta. Russell Wilson versus Oakland. This game is going to be played in London. And the thing I really like about London matchups is we've seen sort of a trend when it comes to London football. And that is that when a team is favored, even by a little bit, I believe the Seahawks are only favored by 2.5 points. The team that's favored more often than not absolutely obliterates the underdog team. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in this game against the Raiders, but the Seahawks, I think they're going to be able to put up some points against the Raiders. They had a very impressive showing at home against the rival Rams. The Rams defense, I would say, is probably slightly more dangerous against the Seahawks because of their pass rush than the Raiders defense is in terms of a threat to Russell Wilson and his success as a quarterback, because the Oakland Raiders don't have a pass rusher. They actually traded their pass rusher. So that being said, I just don't know really what it's going to look like for the Seahawks, because they've had a successful running game, and that's the reason why Russell Wilson's being able to get some time in the pocket. He has a good rapport with Tyler Lockett right now. They're hitting in stride, in deep throws, constant touchdowns almost every week. Doug Baldwin is slowly getting healthier. And I think Russell Wilson's starting to put it together with this offense. And I wouldn't be surprised if he put on a show against the Oakland Raiders here in London for the European fans. Dalton versus Pittsburgh. Andy Dalton has been awesome this year. I think the offense has been taken the next step in creativity. It's totally changed the way the Bengals are playing offense. I haven't seen Andy Dalton and A.J. Green, this connection, look this good since 2015. And A.J. Green's having a year. Joe Mixon is back. They're running the football with success, and their offensive line is holding up. The only reason that Andy Dalton would not have success in this game is if that offensive line has some trouble against the Pittsburgh pass rush, because the Pittsburgh pass rush is fairly good. But if Andy Dalton does get time, this Pittsburgh back end and the linebackers, they cannot cover worth a crap. So that being said, Joe Mixon underneath on some dump-off routes. You get A.J. Green going down the field. You have Tyler Boyd going on those crossing routes. I think there's just too much to match up if you're the Steelers and too much to cover here. I think Andy Dalton has a big day. I do think the Pittsburgh offense will have a big day as well. I'm actually picking the Steelers to win this game, but I think it'll be a high-scoring shootout type of ball game, and I think Andy Dalton should put up some yards. Kirk Cousins versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals, we know, are a terrible football team, and that's really all I got to say. I think Minnesota at home against Arizona, Kirk Cousins has been absolutely on fire this year. He has been potent, and I think that's going to continue. Arizona, yes, they have Patrick Peterson, so probably Stephon Diggs won't have a great day, but Adam Thielen is an absolute machine, and I don't see Patrick Peterson following him into the slot all that much. The corners besides Peterson aren't all that great, and really the Cardinals' defense overall hasn't been as good. I actually think that the Cardinals do give up a lot of running yards, which we'll get to in a little bit. They're 31st in rushing defense. So that being said, Cousins could have a running attack for the first time this entire season. If he gets that going, along with a play-action game, you could see Kyle Rudolph get down the field and just the whole offense start to come together. At home, I love Kirk Cousins this week to at least put up a very solid stat line. Maybe this game gets out of hand and he doesn't put up those huge yardage totals, but he should probably have around 3 touchdowns in this game. Deshaun Watson versus Buffalo. Deshaun Watson, I think finally last week we started to see Deshaun Watson round into form in terms of what we thought Deshaun Watson was last year and coming into this season. And a lot of people picked Deshaun Watson very high in fantasy drafts. I'm not one of those people, but I think you're finally starting to see it pay off because we know that Deshaun Watson at his peak can be a little bit of Cam Newton, a little bit of Russell Wilson. You know, he has that magic like Aaron Rodgers outside the pocket. And I just feel like Deshaun Watson, when he's getting it going against a team like Buffalo, it's at home. They're 10-point favorites. DeAndre Hopkins is balling. Will Fuller is talented. You have Kiki Kote coming out of nowhere and performing. They have a lot of weapons around Watson. Yeah, the offensive line isn't great, but I don't think Buffalo's defensive line is necessarily one to worry about. So Deshaun Watson, I just really like the way he's looked. He's running well. He's throwing it well. He's gaining confidence back, and I think that's the biggest thing with Deshaun Watson. So start him this week. The quarterback sits. Mitch Trubisky versus Miami. The guy threw 6 touchdowns last game against Tampa Bay. If you think that's going to happen again, you're sorely mistaken. Miami secondary is pretty damn solid. They're not a great overall team. They're a decent team, but their secondary is solid, and they don't give up a lot of big plays. I think Trubisky will come back down to earth this week, and I think the Bears will sort of change their game plan. Maybe Trubisky throws 2 touchdowns, but I don't see 6 happening this week. Phillip Rivers versus the Cleveland Browns. This is kind of an odd one. Cleveland really has a pretty good defense, but overall their passing defense in terms of yardage given up is not the greatest. I believe it's around 25th in the league. So Phillip Rivers should have some yards in this game to be had. But I just don't like the Chargers from LA traveling to Cleveland in an early ball game. It's probably going to be pretty sloppy. I think the Chargers are going to be more adept to play in a game that's going to be a little bit lower scoring. I just think this game, like the one a couple years ago, is going to be sloppy, sort of low scoring, maybe a couple big plays here and there. But I just don't see Phillip Rivers having a non-stop awesome game where he's hitting on all cylinders. Keenan Allen's going off, Melvin Gordon's going off. I just don't think that's going to happen. This is more of a gut call. Plus the Chargers are missing 2 of their tackles in this game, so Myles Garrett should put a lot of pressure on Phillip. So I just don't really see Rivers having a huge game here. If you have a better guy to go with him. I'm not going to say like I would hate to start Rivers this week, but at the same time, if you have a guy that I have in the start column, I'd rather start one of those guys. Marcus Mariota versus Baltimore. Again, Marcus Mariota is not very good, and the Tennessee Titans continue to find ways to win games despite his lack of good performance. They lost the Bills last week, but I think this week they'll have a chance. This is going to be a low-scoring game. I think the Titans are going to play very conservative on offense. I don't think Marcus Mariota will have much there because Baltimore has a top 3 defense in the NFL. So that being said, it's at home. The Titans have a chance to win this game, but I don't think it's going to be through the arm of Marcus Mariota. So sit him. Dak Prescott versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville's going to come out angry. They're pissed off. They played with a lot of just conservatives. Like, they were very conservative last week. They were not aggressive. They did not come out and press the issue. And usually with Jacksonville's defense, you see them go after the offense. And I think this week you're going to see that again. Because the Jaguars know Dak Prescott doesn't have any receivers. He can't beat Jalen Ramsey deep. They can't beat A.J. Bouye over the middle. They can't do anything. They're just going to stuff the box, take away Zeke in that run game, and force Dak and focus on Dak's running game. So I don't think that Dak's going to have a successful game here. Even if he has one-on-one matchups on the outside, it's not favorable. So this is just a all-around poor matchup for Dak Prescott. Sit him against a very, very motivated Jaguars defense. Baker Mayfield versus the Chargers. Like I said, even for the Browns, I think this is going to be a sloppy game. I don't like this. I like the way that the Chargers defense looked last week. They're a lot more aggressive. They were a lot more all over, ball carriers. They were all over the quarterback. Melvin Ingram looked good. And I just think they're forming as a group, the Chargers defense. And Baker Mayfield, yeah, he played the Ravens last week. They're a phenomenal defense. So there's nothing really to be ashamed of there. But I just think that they're going to have more success running the ball in this game. Carlos Hyde, the Chargers defense in the past couple of years, their weakness has been against the run. So Carlos Hyde should have a decent game. But Baker Mayfield overall, I think he's going to be under pressure. I just don't see how Casey Hayward is going to let up a lot of plays to Jarvis Landry. So I don't love the matchup on both sides for Cleveland and LA. I just see this game being low scoring, kind of sloppy, not the greatest football. At the running back position, I'm starting off with Carlos Hyde. The Chargers have been one of the worst teams against the run the last 2 years. They're like mediocre this year so far. But I think that for the Browns to win this game, they're at home. They're going to have to run it a lot. They're going to have to keep Rivers on the sideline. And I think that Carlos Hyde overall is going to have probably 25 carries in this game. I could see him getting a couple of touchdowns here. I just think he's going to be the focal point of this offensive attack for Cleveland. Then you have Marshawn Lynch for Seattle. This is simply a human motivation. This is a revenge game. This is revenge time for Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch has looked great this year. He had an off week last week, and that was the first one in this entire season. I think he bounced back this week against Seattle. Like I said, there's a chance that Seattle does have a blowout, but there's also a chance that Oakland gets the upset here. So I think if they have a chance in this game, it's going to be through the legs of Marshawn Lynch. I could see the big, overpowering Oakland offensive line dominating a smaller front in Seattle. And I think Marshawn is just going to run with a lot of heart and a lot of passion. And that's what the type of Marshawn beast mode I want on my fantasy team. You have Tevin Coleman versus Tampa Bay. Coleman is just a jack of all trades. Now he's taking over for Devontae Freeman. He's a very good back, a lot of speed. I could see him having a nice day against Tampa Bay here. This is going to be a high-scoring game. He'll be involved in the passing game. He'll be involved in the running game. He's going to be the #1 back, no committee. So I see Coleman getting a lot of touches and a lot of points this week against Tampa Bay. James White versus Kansas City. Kansas City's defense is bad, and it's particularly not very good at the linebacker position covering running backs. I could see that James White having a great game. I could actually see this game. A lot of people think this is going to be a Sony Michel game. I could see Sony playing well, but I could see this game being one of those games as a Patriots fan where they come out in 5 wide. They have James White split out to the right. They have Edelman in the slot, Gronk in the slot. They have Gordon on the outside. They're just going to go boom, 5 yards, boom, 6 yards, boom, 7 yards, 20, 5, 2. They're just going to keep throwing it all day long. Brady's going to be like 50 passing attempts in this game. I could just see it being a high-scoring game. I could see the Patriots trying to dictate the tempo with their passing offense, and James White would be a huge proponent of that. So you have to go with James White against Kansas City this week. And my risky sort of start, but I'm saying that this is probably a good start because the Arizona Cardinals defense is bad against the run. They're 31st against the run. Dalvin Cook should be able to take advantage. This should be the week where he breaks out. And even in the weeks where he wasn't playing great, he wasn't bad. Like, he wasn't awful. So he's going to get opportunity. Maybe Latavius Murray takes some opportunity away from him later in the game. But if you don't have anything better on your roster and you really counted on Dalvin Cook, you picked him in the second round, you counted on him to be a star on your team, start him against the Cardinals. It's about that time where you need these wins. You need to count on your studs. So go with Dalvin Cook in your roster against the 31st best run defense in the NFL. Running back sits. Adrian Peterson versus Carolina. You saw Saquon Barkley. Look at what he did against the Eagles this week. And the Eagles defense is really good. He did basically nothing against Carolina in terms of the run game. So I could see Adrian Peterson, again, last week against the Saints. Not a good game. This week, I could see Carolina stuffing the run, forcing Alex Smith to beat them. And Adrian Peterson is a very one-dimensional player. He's a run-only type of guy. You know when he's in the game, it's rather play action or it's a run. So overall, Carolina is going to be keying on that. They have very smart linebackers. They're going to be motivated with Thomas Davis coming back. Don't love the matchup for AP. Titans running backs versus Baltimore. Baltimore's run defense is phenomenal. Their defense in general is phenomenal. I could see this game being under 17 points for both teams. I just don't see either one being successful. I would say probably Lewis over Henry this week if I had to start one, but overall not a huge fan. LaShawn McCoy versus Houston. Houston's run defense has been consistently very good throughout this entire year since getting J.J. Watt back, and Jadeveon Clowney is a monster on the edge against the run. It's just going to be difficult for McCoy to really find any holes against this team. They're probably going to focus on LaShawn McCoy, stop the run, and force Josh Allen, the young quarterback, to beat them. And I just think it will be a long day for a bad offensive line versus a really good front in Houston. Drake versus Chicago. Kenyon Drake was really good last week, but this week he's playing arguably the best defense in the NFL and arguably the best front. So this week, he's been consistent already this year. I'm not counting on him against Chicago. Alex Collins versus Tennessee. Tennessee's run defense, wasn't great last week, but it was good. And they've been one of the better run defenses, as I say, almost every week over the past few years. And I think Alex Collins hasn't been great for you. You know, he scores a touchdown every once in a while, but they haven't been taking an advantage. And like I said with the Titans running backs, this game's probably going to be under 17 points for both teams. So I don't see this being an overall high-scoring game with a lot of opportunity for touchdowns. So I'd sit Alex Collins. Wide receiver starts. Boyd versus Pittsburgh. Like I said, I think a lot of focus is going to be on A.J. Green. A lot of focus will be on Joe Mixon for the Pittsburgh defense, and Boyd will be able to take advantage. He's a talented wide receiver. They're going to get him more involved this week as opposed to last week, and I could see him having a big game against the Steelers. Deshaun Jackson versus Atlanta. Atlanta gives up a ton of big plays. Deshaun Jackson is the big play receiver, and like I said with Jameis Winston will take the chance, take the deep shot. So Deshaun Jackson should have a great game in a shootout type atmosphere in Atlanta. Mohamed Sanu versus Tampa Bay. Sanu has had some really, really good games over the past 3 to 4 weeks now. I like him against Tampa Bay, a secondary that can't cover me out there. Their safety play is the worst in the NFL. Sanu should find his way into the end zone this week, and probably with a couple extra big plays for Matt Ryan. Larry Fitzgerald versus Minnesota. Now, Larry Fitzgerald has not been a good start recent weeks, but if you're in need of a guy and you drafted Fitzgerald to be that consistent force on your team, Xavier Rhodes should be covering somebody else because he covers outside. He doesn't cover the slot guy. So Fitzgerald overall should be a decent start here, given that he has the best overall advantage in the slot against whoever he's facing on Minnesota, and Rosen should look to that as his quick first option. Here we go. All right, I think it's the week, guys. I think it's the week where Josh Gordon takes the NFL by storm and absolutely obliterates this Kansas City Chiefs secondary. I'm starting Josh Gordon this week. I could see him having 2 touchdowns. I could see him having 100 yards. Think about it. Gronk is going to be double, triple teamed. They have nobody to cover him with. Eric Berry's not there. Their linebackers suck. They don't have anybody to cover him with. They're going to have to cover him with 2 guys at least. Julian Edelman will take Kendall Fuller and maybe even another player with him. And then you have James White to worry about. The running game with Sony Michel. Josh Gordon's going to have, against the worst defense in the NFL, some guy like Steven Nelson, one-on-one? Give me that all day. Tom Brady's going to go to that. He's going to attack that. And I think Josh Gordon's going to have a huge game, his breakout Patriots game. And now that Brady trusts him, that's big because he got that touchdown last week. Wide receiver sits. Corey Davis versus Baltimore. Don't got to say much. Jimmy Smith's a beast. Corey Davis is inconsistent because Marcus Mariota is inconsistent. And Baltimore's defense is really, really good. Follow the trend that I've been talking about. Robinson versus Miami. Xavier Howard, very good corner against Allen Robinson. Hasn't been very consistent. Hasn't seen a lot of targets the last couple of weeks. I think that Chicago will come back down to earth as an offense. Robinson should have like 5-6 catches, but he's not going to absolutely destroy, you know, this week. And if you have a better option, he's just not been a guy to count on so far this year. Kenny Stills versus Chicago. I don't see them giving up any big plays. I think Tannehill will struggle in this game. I think their passing offense will struggle. I think Chicago's defense will dominate this matchup. So I don't see Kenny Stills having a great game in this one or getting deep in this game. Michael Crabtree versus Tennessee. Crabtree, you know, had a lot of targets last week, had a fairly decent PPR game last week. But against Tennessee, I think a guy like Logan Ryan will be a very nice matchup for Michael Crabtree. Solid physical corner that has a lot of similar skill set to Michael Crabtree. That's going to be a good matchup for the Titans. So I think that overall a guy to take advantage of for Baltimore would be more of John Brown, not necessarily Michael Crabtree this week. So again, low scoring game, not a huge fan. Rams receivers versus Denver. This is a risk sit. But hear me out. If this game ends up snowing like it's supposed to, if this game's snowing and Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks are already hurt, banged up, then if you have a better option, go with those guys. If the weather sucks and those guys we already know are banged up and not exactly healthy, Robert Woods is a different story, but Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks, I'm not a huge fan because this game could become a run it type of game, a Todd Gurley type of game, and I just don't really like that. If the weather is poor, it's in Mile High, not a huge fan there for the Rams receivers. Tight end position, the starts, Hooper versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, the worst team against tight ends this year, and like I said, this game should be an absolute shootout. Uzoman, I don't know how to pronounce his name yet because I've only seen him play like twice, so I'm just going off statistics on this one, so don't blame me. He used to be the third-string tight end for Cincinnati. Now he's the second-string tight end. He used to be behind Tyler Kroft. Now he's ahead. So he's played 91.7% of the snaps for the Cincinnati Bengals coming in last week as the starter. So that being said, he has a lot of opportunity here. And Pittsburgh's defense, we know, can't cover tight ends. He's an athletic guy. He has some skills in the passing game. He's not just a blocking tight end. So he's worth a shot if you really don't have a guy at that position. Cameron Brate versus Atlanta. We know Cameron Brate, Jameis Winston have a good connection. So this should be absolutely a good game for Cameron Brate as O.J. Howard is injured. So Cam Brate should have a nice game. Deshaun Jackson should have a nice game. This offense in general should have a nice game. Vance McDonald versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati, not the greatest against tight ends. Vance McDonald, athletic guy, going to be a tough matchup for those slower Cincinnati linebackers. And like I said, this game should be higher scoring. These are two not very good defenses. So I have Vance McDonald having a good week. And the last one here is if you have him, Greg Olsen versus Washington. Yes, he's been injured. It's a risky start, but there's not a lot of tight ends to play in this league. And if you have Greg Olsen and you have a guy in your lineup right now that isn't exactly the most consistent guy, I would go with Greg Olsen still. He is such a consistent target for Cam Newton, and if he thinks he's healthy enough to go, then put him in there. Just see what happens. I think this game could be higher scoring than people think, so that's a positive. You know, it's risky, but sometimes you got to be risky to win in fantasy football. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe for more fantasy football starts and sits on the Bottom Line View. It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View. If you have any questions, leave them below. Your starts and sits, any trade recommendations, any sort of stuff like that. Next week, I'm going to be having a video talking about guys you should trade for and trade away. Again, it's Mitch, the Bottom Line View. Hit the like button and subscribe for more. Peace out.